makers and market movers. This is The Pulse with Francine Lacqua.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to a special UK election results edition of The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua at Bloomberg's election debrief event here at Westminster, just a stone's throw away from Downing Street, which will be home to Labour Prime Minister again for the first time in 14 years. So Labour has ended 14 years of Conservative government in the UK after storming a landslide election victory. Labour leader Keir Starmer is set to become Prime Minister, with his party winning more than 400 seats in Parliament and the biggest majority since 1997. Starmer says change is coming.
It's the guiding principle, everything we have done and must keep on doing. On the economy, on national security, on protect our borders. The British people had to look us in the eye and see that we can serve their interest. And that work doesn't stop now. It never stops. The changes we've made are permanent, irreversible, and we must keep going. We ran as a changed Labour Party, and we will govern as a changed Labour Party.
Well, the outgoing Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has taken responsibility for the Conservatives' poor results. Several high-profile Tories have lost their seats, including the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called Sir Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory. Today, power will change hands in a peaceful and orderly manner, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence in our country's stability and future. The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
So the market reaction, well, it's been not really a market event, but let's look at pound and also some of the major indices also gilts. Now, stocks and government bonds seem to be rising. Let's bring that up for you if we can. But the pound has been strengthening for 7 straight days. Again, it's strengthening again after this Labour winning a majority, giving it a clear mandate to deliver on its pledge for greater economic stability. What you hear from certain corners of the city is that they were worried about a Liz Truss event happening. And so with Labour, they feel like they're in safer hands because of the turmoil that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 years under the Conservative government. Now, we have a range of guests this hour, including the new Labour MP, Uma Kumaran, the former Natwest chair, Howard Davies, and the former Legal and General Chief Executive, Nigel Wilson. So all of that and much more is coming up. We also have market analysis and economics analysis with Simon French. But joining us now on the morning of her party's historic win is Liz Kendall, UK Labour Party MP and Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Liz Kendall, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, what's it like at Labour Party right now?
I think people are really proud of this historic victory that Keir has led us to. And, you know, if you'd asked me the morning after the 2019 election, when we had one of our worst defeats in history, whether we would be here, I probably would not have believed you. But I think the win that we've seen is testament to Keir's leadership, the fact that he has changed the Labour Party and wants to get it again, put it in the service of the British people. He said in his speech this morning we could have a moment of pride and celebration, but then we have to roll up our sleeves and get working. So we know there's a big job ahead, but we are clear-eyed and we are determined, and change is coming to Britain.
So what does getting to work mean for pensions? I know you've so far refused that you would, or you've ruled out actually scrapping the 25% tax-free allowance on pensions. Can you rule it out now, or is it too soon?
Well, listen, you spoke in your introduction about the need for economic stability, which was at the heart of our manifesto, as well as our plans for growth, our #1 priority for the government. and I am sure we will get to work straight away on those growth plans. Somebody's happy in the background, the great British democracy. But for pensions, we've said we'll protect the triple lock, and we do not want to see the turbulence and the chaos that has actually hit pensioners in this country hard. We now have around 1 in 5 pensioners in Britain living in poverty, and so there's a big agenda there to get that security and stability, bring the cost of living crisis down, and give pensioners the confidence that they can enjoy a decent security in retirement.
The Tories!
So what does that look like in terms of your first? You're right, there is a lot of celebration behind you. What are the top 3 priorities that you'd like to put in place to see a difference with pensions?
Well, I want to make sure that pensioners know that their basic state pension is going to be protected by the triple lock, that we want to build on the success of auto-enrolment, which was a real achievement of the last Labour government that was then carried on by the coalition government. And we also want to make sure that the economy is stable, that we bring down the cost of living, because one of the things that's really hit pensioners hard are those struggles with paying the bills and the food and fuel. So there are a whole series of issues that we need to look at. But the key to all of this, and something I know that your viewers will be interested in, is our plans for growth. Our number 1 priority, creating the jobs of the future that we need in clean energy, and our plans for Great British Energy. Our plan to transform skills, because that's one of the real challenges businesses raise with me. And in my own area, work and pensions, bringing down economic inactivity. We have the highest number of people out of work due to long-term sickness. That's not good for them, it's not good for businesses who are desperate to recruit, and it's not good for the taxpayer who's paying billions more on benefit bills because people are trapped out of work because of sickness. A big agenda. We can't change everything overnight, but we will roll up our sleeves and make a start.
I'm here, Liz Kendall, where we're having a debrief with a lot of city grandees, a lot of people in business, a lot of chief executives, and they probably want to know 2 things. First of all, how will Labour change the workplace? So what does it mean in terms of flexibility to fire and hire? So anything that you can give us on that would be great. But also, does Labour need a new industrial plan? And where is that on the priority list?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that second question. The first question was about the workplace, and we've said we'll have a new deal for working people, and we've set out the plans for that to improve rights at work, but that we will of course implement that in discussion with businesses. What was the second question? Sorry, I've got some other stuff going on in the background that makes it hard to hear what you're asking. So the second question,
I know. There's a party at Westminster behind you, Liz Kendall. The second question was on an industrial plan. Does the UK need a new industrial plan going forward?
Yes, we have committed to having a modern industrial strategy where businesses know the government's commitment, the investment that we'll put in, that we hope will leverage in the private sector investment to create the jobs of the future, particularly around clean and green energy, but also our reforms to the planning system so that we can build the infrastructure and the labs and data centres that we really need. You know, I think this has been a real problem in the country for too long, the weak or stagnant growth. That is at the heart of this doom loop that we have got into. Ever higher taxes, low growth and worse public services. I know we won't be able to change everything overnight, but one of our big messages has been to businesses, we can't deliver this without you. We'll work in partnership with you and give you that stability and security you need to invest and to have the confidence. I mean, there's been so much turbulence in the UK with different governments, 5 different prime ministers, 7 different chancellors, and that has not been good. It hasn't given businesses the confidence to invest in this country. But under Keir Starmer's leadership with Rachel Reeves, I believe that's one of the biggest changes we'll make.
Liz Kendall, thank you so much for braving the chanting and the protests and also the partying behind you. That was the UK Labour Party MP and Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. There you go. It's never dull. Thank you so much for joining us. Now let's talk about the markets and economics with Simon French. He's Panmure Gordon's managing director and head of research, who also joins me. Now, Simon, we're in a little bit of a quieter place. So this is where the Westminster Bloomberg debrief is happening. I mean, it's not a really market event because the polls were so far ahead for Labour. But what are you looking at for the next couple of weeks that could be market moving? We need, more news on pensions, on workplace, but also taxation.
We do, and I think you're right to ask those, what I would describe as microeconomic questions, because the macroeconomic picture is set out by Rachel Reeves, who will be the UK's new finance minister. She's not going to deviate hugely in terms of the fiscal policy, monetary policy pretty well set, and of course independent to the Bank of England. So it is those micro changes on pensions, but also on planning and reintroducing, if you like, the growth drivers into the UK economy. And I think my big takeaway actually from overnight was, while it was a landslide in what our American viewers would call the Electoral College, it certainly wasn't a landslide in terms of the popular vote. Only just over 1 in 3 people who voted actually voted for the Labour Party, despite the fact that they've got 420, 430 seats. So that's an extraordinary, if you like, contradiction between the Electoral College, which would suggest to them, actually, there's a huge mandate for big change, controversial change on areas like planning, albeit whether a marginal constituencies with narrow majorities, will they have the backbone to go with controversial planning changes, but also changes on business rates, on council tax, the kind of things, microeconomic changes, which we all believe as economists will have a big impact on the UK's trend growth.
So first of all, Sam, talking about the timeline, do they have 100 days to really make a difference, also to make sure that voters that didn't vote for the Labour Party are on side? And what should they start with? And we're talking skills, trade. There's also, of course, pensions, but there's loads of stuff that they could work on.
Well, for capital markets participants, I do think your first question, actually, to Liz Kendall was exactly the right one. On pensions, they promised a review of pensions. They spoke about, in their manifesto, being much more comfortable with, compared to the outgoing Conservative government, with UK pension funds over-allocating to UK assets. And for UK assets, both equities and bonds that have been under pressure, actually, certainly in the last 8 years since the Brexit vote, and certainly very acutely after 2022 in the mini-budget, the degree of stability, but also perhaps some pump priming through regulation for the UK's asset management industry, which is the second biggest in the world, to allocate more to its domestic market. I think that's the market-moving event rather than what we've seen overnight. The
concern is that this takes time, and Keir Starmer, I think, promised a 2.5% growth target. So how is he going to achieve that?
I think that's unrealistic, honestly. That's probably, I don't think we should look at the highest sustained growth rate in the G7, which is what he said in the manifesto, as particularly achievable short term, because the UK's only achieved that twice in the last 40 years by my data. It's a really difficult thing to achieve structurally. The easiest way to achieve it actually is to increase migration, and actually politically that would appear to be quite a toxic thing for any part of the political spectrum to do. So near term, I do think pensions reform will be key. I also think there's 9.4 million working age people who are inactive, not in work, not seeking work. That is a huge number of scarce resources. The quickest way to get growth back into the UK economy is to find perhaps 1 million of those people who were recently, probably pre-pandemic, engaged with the UK labour market, get them back engaged, back seeking work, back in work. That's the quickest way to raise growth.
But Simon, how difficult is it to calibrate? So they want to protect workers. How do you do that without becoming like France, where you can't fire anyone and therefore hurting growth in business?
You do it piecemeal, you do it slowly, you don't do it in one big bang. A bit like, actually, to give the outgoing government, indeed, the previous Labour government and the outgoing government their credit, they've done quite a lot on low pay over about 15 years in the UK economy, actually more than that, almost 25 years now, from introduction of the national minimum wage, which, if you remember the debate back in 1998, I certainly do, because I was working on this area, at £3.60 it was, well, will that generate unemployment? Will that make the UK's labour market less flexible? It's gone from £3.60 to today £11.40, and yet unemployment's still just 4.4%, and by international standards, the UK labour market's pretty flexible. Now, you're talking about a different set of things here regarding the abolition of zero-hours contracts, the rights of workers from day one. That's why I say, do this thing piecemeal. change something, evaluate it, see whether it changes employee demand, labour market flexibility, and then go further if you feel that the labour market can absorb that without a correction on the employment rate.
Simon, I mean, when you look at the market event, there hasn't been one. Is that because the UK is maybe seen as, you know, a good house in a bad neighbourhood? I mean, you have France with all of the drama election, and then you have Biden on the other side with the US elections and all of the uncertainty. So the UK seems fairly stable.
Well, I certainly think that is, the international comparison is one. But also, Rachel Reeves has done what Liz Truss did not do. She has primed the market on what to expect. And this has been a multi-year process. Of course, she was in Washington last year talking about securonomics, unveiling what is not a particularly catchy term. Let's not kid ourselves. I've dubbed it Bidenomics, but without the balance sheet. But to some extent, for international investors looking at the UK, and they're going, actually, we would like some of the self-harm of Brexit and the mini-budget to go away. Securonomics is exactly what business wants to hear to invest more. So actually, that plan of fewer surprises is actually what financial markets want to hear today and actually want to hear over the next 100 days.
Simon, thank you so much. Simon French there, Panmure Gordon's Managing Director and Head of Research. Now, we'll have plenty more from here throughout the day. We'll also get the view from the former Natwest Group Chairman, Howard Davies, on what business is expecting from a Labour government. That's next, and this is Bloomberg. The former Bank of England economist Rachel Reeves is set to become the UK's first female Chancellor. Now, Reeves was key to Labour's pitch to business, and she'll have to hit the ground running with the new government inheriting a number of economic challenges. Well, with me now is the former NatWest Group Chairman and now Inigo Chairman, Howard Davies. Thank you so much for joining us. What's the way forward for UK PLC and UK growth?
Well, I think in the short run, we could find some quite good news coming our way, because I think interest rates will fall. And the Bank of England pretty clearly signalled that. There's a lot of savings, particularly in the retail sector, which can be spent, and real incomes are rising. The rest of the world looks a bit dodgy, so the pound will probably be fairly strong, and I think this UK stock market will probably be strong. It could benefit from that because quite cheap at the moment.
FTSE 250,
yeah,
the one that tracks the economy.
Exactly. I think in the short run, we should see investment reasonably strong and public and consumer spending reasonably strong. So there could be a bit of a sugar rush over the next 12 months or so. But of course, the underlying problems of the British economy will not be altered by that.
But so what does Labour need to do now? Where do they need to be decisive on? Is it planning? Is it actually, taxes? Do they need to give a clear message to businesses and the outside world to attract, international investment?
Yes, I think so. But I think the fact that they will have a large working majority and some stability will be in itself a benefit. And so we'll get some uptick from that. But I think being clear in the fiscal statement, which I imagine will be in the autumn, about what the future fiscal rules are would be beneficial. We now have a very peculiar fiscal framework which says that borrowing must be falling in year 4 or 5 of the Parliament. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I think going back to something like what Gordon Brown had, which is borrowing only for investment, I think you could sell that, particularly a government that otherwise was being pretty disciplined on routine public spending. And that could give them some headroom for infrastructure investment, which would be very helpful as well. So I think that's what people are going to be looking for, is a sensible framework in the autumn. And I think she's got a window over the summer to put that together.
But Labour have also tried to pitch this growth at 2.5%.
Yeah.
How do you achieve that without risk-taking? And risk-taking, it maybe doesn't come easy when it comes to investing in startups, if you Labour.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can quite see how you get to 2.5% when productivity has been trundling along at maybe 0.5%. And so that's going to be very, very tough. So in the short run, you might, with some consumer spending boost and some infrastructure spending and some construction, there's a lot of construction projects waiting in the wings that probably will now start. You might claw yourself up close to 2% in the first year or so. But unless you can do something fundamental on productivity and investment, I think 2.5% is going to be a very tough thing to get.
I mean, Labour also said they want a closer relationship with the EU. I don't think from the EU side there's any appetite to renegotiate anything, frankly, because they're distracted with elections and various problems they have at home. But what does that look like for financial services?
Yeah, well, I'm not that optimistic on that front. And I think that saying in the later stages of the campaign, as Keir Starmer did, that we're never going to be in the single market in his lifetime, etc. I don't know why you want to tie your hands, because Europe is changing as well. You know, it takes two sides for a negotiation. All kinds of things about freedom of movement are being thrown into question by the French election, which in European terms is much more significant than ours. And who knows what kind of immigration, migration, free movement arrangements might emerge in Europe in the next 3 or 4 years, which might be something that was more comfortable for us. So I would rule nothing out. I think in the short run, they can push on professional services qualifications. Maybe they'll get somewhere there. They will not secure equivalence for the City of London, I don't think, unless there's a new commissioner who really wants to move in that direction. But, you know, the city has managed to sort of find a way, as you know, to accommodate itself to these new arrangements. So I don't think that there's any great urgency to deal with that. The euro clearing issue remains an awkward one, but my feeling is that the Europeans are losing on that.
Is there a danger that Labour attacks banks? Because they're looking for money, and politically this could be, you know, sold to the public quite easily.
Well, Rachel Reeves was a banker as well as a central banker, and she has ruled out windfalls. I think in Labour doesn't really like windfall taxes, and they can have some adverse consequences. There's the bank levy still, etc., and I don't think the banks can expect any favours from a Labour government. But I think that they'll be more keen to use the banks to boost investment than to increase taxation on banks, which would reduce their willingness to lend. So I feel that probably banks will get more jaw pressure to invest and lend to small businesses and on infrastructure projects, etc., than they will get clobbered with additional taxation.
So what's the right way of doing it? If you attract investment, is it, you know, inward investment, or is it from, for example, you know, this UK ISA that the Tories had floated, or is it actually international investment to bring in? What's more fruitful?
Yeah, I don't think a UK ISA is going to make a great deal of difference, frankly. I mean, it might relatively boost a few UK stocks versus others, but I think that a long-term decision about the future corporation tax regime. I mean, the Tories have gone push me, pull you on corporation tax. The rate's going up, the rate's going down, the allowance is going up, the allowance is going down. I think they need to set out what their corporation tax regime will be for the next 5 years. I think that would be enormously helpful. Maybe they should say something about competition policy, which is also a concern to overseas investors, because our competition policy has seemed to be a bit out of line with what's going on in Europe. So I think just setting those dials and committing to keeping them the same for 5 years would be quite beneficial on attracting inward investment.
Sir Howard, thank you so much for joining us. That was Howard Davies, the Indigo chairman and former Natwest Group chairman. Now, coming up, we'll have plenty more here from Westminster. We'll also be joined by Bloomberg's editor-in-chief, John Micklethwaite, as we discuss Labour's landslide victory and the priorities that they'll have to put in place quite soon. We're also looking at live pictures of Downing Street. More on this next. This is Bloomberg. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to a special UK election results edition of The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua at Bloomberg's election debrief here at Westminster, just a stone's throw away from Downing Street, which will be home, of course, to a Labour Prime Minister again for the first time in 14 years. So Labour has ended 14 years of Conservative government in the UK after storming to a landslide election victory. Labour leader Keir Starmer is set to become Prime Minister later today, with his party winning more than 400 seats. And we're just looking at the Chancellor as he was leaving Downing Street, number 11, with his family. Live pictures there.
It's the guiding principle, everything we have done and must keep on doing, on the economy, on national security, on protecting our borders. The British people had to look us in the eye and see that we can serve their interests. And that work doesn't stop now. It never stops. The changes we've made are permanent, irreversible, and we must keep going. We ran as a changed Labour Party, and we will govern as a changed Labour Party.
We're looking at live pictures of Downing Street. So we were just seeing Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, with his family and wife leaving Number 11. And of course, there's all the pageantry today of Rishi Sunak also going to see the King. So joining us to talk about all of this and some of the policies ahead is John Micklethwaite, Bloomberg's editor-in-chief. John, it's always quite exciting. So we're literally on the other side of where we see this fan pulling up. It's always quite exciting to see a change of power.
You just called it pageantry. It's actually very, it's people moving out very quickly with a removal van. I remember years ago when Labour lost their majority, Peter Mandelson, who some people thought was the most powerful man in the country. The next day I met him bicycling up St James's Street. It's a much more, compared with what happens in America and places like this, it's very immediate and you might argue extremely democratic.
You're right, but at the same time you go and see the King.
You go and see the King, yeah.
Sees the King, so that's a bit of pageantry. So what happens today?
I think two things have happened. One is that, Starmer has won, but possibly more the Tories have lost. You just look at the vote, his vote didn't go up much, theirs collapsed. Paradoxically, despite that, Keir Starmer is now an enormously powerful figure, both in terms of Britain, but also I think Keir Starmer is now a very important figure on the global stage. You look around the world, Macron in trouble, Scholz in trouble in Germany, Joe Biden, it could be a long weekend for him. Here is a man who nobody really knew or thought about before, but who is now going to be part of the West, part of the leadership of the West for 5 years. So Keir Starmer now has much more clout, not just within Britain, but also within the world than actually you could argue a British Prime Minister has had pretty much since David Cameron or maybe since Tony Blair.
So, John, what kind of alliances will he try and develop? Will he try and get close to the US? There's also this NATO summit that you were saying.
Yes. Next week, it will be that evident, suddenly, that he is the person with a more obvious long-term future than anyone else there. I think his main focus will be on Europe. If I was him, the single thing he needs most is growth. Britain doesn't have much money. Everything changes if the economy begins to grow. If you can refashion Britain's relationship with Europe, you open up the amount of growth by an enormous amount. And so if he can do anything on that front, it would help. And his only bad luck is that this is happening at precisely the time both France and Germany are in a massive degree of dysfunction.
But, John, when you look at, so we have a brilliant story basically saying that because it's maybe more of a referendum on the Tories and it is really a love for Labour, especially if you look at the popular vote, what's he going to do in the next 100 days? So does he focus on domestic policies? Is it taxation? Is it the workplace? Or is it also foreign policy?
I think it's less about what he actually does and how he does it, because I think most people, we're here surrounded by financiers and business people here, most of those people have a kind of pretty good trust that Starmer isn't going to do anything too bad. But his whole kind of emotional starting point is gradualism. This is a man who came in, and over the course of 4 or 5 years, changed the Labour Party unbelievably. But he didn't do it straight away at the beginning. Now he's Prime Minister, actually, when it comes to the big decisions, changing the planning laws in Britain, trying to do a new relationship with Europe, opening up other things. These are all things where you need to start early and you need to start radically. And the comparison with Tony Blair, I'm tragically old enough to remember all this. Blair, no, you were a babe at that time. The Blair came in with this radical thing straight away with the Bank of England. You would like Starmer to have something which has got an element that could make that difference.
And yet it feels a bit different. We'll come to that in just a second, John. Stay with us. Let's also turn to the Liberal Democrats, one of the big winners from this election. Joining us now is Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats. Thank you so much, Daisy Cooper, for joining us. We all saw the pictures of Ed Davey actually dancing euphorically to Sweet Caroline. How's the night been?
Oh, it's been a fantastic night. I mean, we're absolutely thrilled with these record-breaking results that we've had. We're incredibly humbled that so many people have put their trust and support in us. And as I say, it's a very exciting time. During the general election campaign, we said very clearly that we wanted to save our NHS, fix our social care system, take real action on the cost of living and protect our local environment. And those are precisely the priorities that we're going to campaign on in the next Parliament.
So again, you're now jumping back at the forefront of UK politics. What are your 2-3 top priorities on how you're hoping to influence actually Westminster?
Well, in the last Parliament, we, as a much smaller parliamentary party, we had a huge amount of influence because we were the first party to call for a windfall tax on the big oil and gas companies, and that was copied by Labour and then by the Conservatives. We were the first party to call for the energy price hike to be scrapped. That was copied by Labour and then the Conservatives. And we were the first party to put the sewage scandal right on the middle of the political agenda in this country. And so we managed to do that in the last Parliament with just 15 MPs. Now we have around 70 MPs. You can just imagine the kind of influence that we may be able to have. And the very first thing that we have called for already is we've called on the new government to announce an emergency health and social care budget, because we know that health services are on their knees and the country is crying out for our health and social care systems to be fixed.
Do you worry about funding of that? I mean, if that's your priority, where does the money come from?
Well, during the campaign, we set out our fully funded plans to fix our NHS and tackle the social care crisis. We said that we wanted to invest an additional £9.5 billion a year, and that would be funded by closing a loophole and basically taxing the big banks and the billionaires. The Conservative government, unbelievably, in the last government, actually gave a tax cut to the big banks of £4 billion a year, and we would reverse that and spend that money on our NHS. At the same time, there's a loophole in the capital gains tax system which allows the 0.1% richest people not to pay a fair amount. And we want those 0.1% richest people in the country, those billionaires, to pay a little bit more to help struggling families and to fix our public services, which are quite frankly crying out for action and crying out for solutions too.
Daisy Cooper, do you think there's a necessity for some kind of windfall tax on banks?
No, so I think there's a very strong case for closing the loophole in the windfall tax on the big oil and gas companies, because they have had genuine windfall taxes that were not expected, and they've made billions of pounds because of the war in Ukraine. And therefore we've said that not only did we call for the windfall tax initially, but we're now saying that the loopholes in the windfall tax should be closed. I think with banks it's a very different situation. It's not so much a windfall, but I do think they should be taxed fairly. And what we're saying is that it's unfair that the Conservative government gave a tax cut to the big banks when ordinary folk were really struggling. That's why our fair solution is to reverse the tax cuts on the big banks, put the tax levels back to the levels they were at in 2016, and use that additional £4 billion a year to invest in saving our NHS and social care services. That is a fair form of taxation. That would be a fair way of improving our public services.
Daisy Cooper, thank you so much for joining us, the deputy leader there of the Liberal Democrats, after, I'm sure, a pretty long night. Let's bring our editor-in-chief, John Micklethwaite, back. John said Liberal Democrats, their record-breaking night with 70 seats. I mean, the politics in the UK have completely changed. This is not just one party losing and the other one winning.
They're in a very interesting position, the Liberal Democrats. On the one hand, this is an amazing night for them, the best night they've ever had. On the other hand, the fact now they have a Labour Party that doesn't need them. The Labour Party could do whatever it likes for the next 5 years. So the Liberals are stuck in an interesting position, and the obvious way in which they would hope to put themselves forward is to say, we want to replace the Conservatives as being the opposition. Because if the Tories head to the right, that does open up some room for them. And really that is where the debate within the Conservative Party, at this precise moment, the Conservative Party does not matter much. But over the course of the next few years, it will matter, because either it swings to the right, tries to do stuff with reform, goes in that direction. I would argue that's a direction where actually it probably seals off any chance of coming back properly, or else it begins to push back into those seats that the Liberals won. There are places that you and I never dreamt of turning away from the Conservatives. Aldershot, Basingstoke, in all these places, green, leafy suburbs, they've gone to the Liberals.
And you have a number of Tory grandees, right, that have lost their seats, which frankly, when you look at the names that have been at Westminster for 20 years, do you worry that there's not going to be a very strong functioning opposition, which any democracy needs?
Well, the Tories, I think, have proven that they are fantastically dysfunctional in government. They have to. Their new job is to be less dysfunctional in opposition, and a lot depends which way they go. And from that perspective, there's one piece of good news, I would argue, from the point of view of trying to keep them together. Jeremy Hunt, who many people expected to lose, got through on a personal vote. Penny Mordaunt, quite interestingly, did a lot better, in a much more marginal seat, nearly won it, came quite close. But the real, a lot of the centre ground of the leaders came out. So you're looking more towards people like Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman. It's that side of it. But it doesn't, the Tories, everyone always forgets, they are the most successful political party in the West. They have repeatedly been able to regenerate. This time, it does look, I think, harder than I've ever seen it.
Sir Keir Starmer came under quite a lot of criticism for not having enough charisma, for not having enough oomph, fire in the belly. Will we see that from him as Prime Minister?
I think the answer is probably not fire in the belly in the way you say it. Keir Starmer, I've known for a long time. He is a quiet fire in the belly. He's someone, he was a passionate human rights figure. He does do this, but his style is much more of a lawyer. He waits until he's spoken to. The judge has said it's time to talk. And the other thing is this gradualist element. He changed this party gradually. He's now in a position where he's got to act quite quickly to make things happen, and that will be the really difficult bit. If he comes out, pulls some rabbits out of the hat, as they say, in the same way as Blair did with the Bank of England, then I think people, he has a real chance of consolidating things. And the biggest opportunity, it cannot be stressed too much, is Europe. If he does some kind of deal with Europe, you get the most amount of growth, more than you would do out of planning, more than any of these things. And also you stand this chance politically, which I think Tony Blair would have seized, and it's not clear whether Keir Starmer will, that if you push the Tories into a position where you have a new deal with Europe and, say, a Suella Braverman-led Tories, or God knows that Nigel Farage one says, no, we would pull out of that, I think you would then see the commercial classes of Britain really going to Labour, and that would be a seismic shift.
John, thank you so much. John Micklethwaite there, our Bloomberg editor-in-chief. Now, more business reaction to Labour's landslide election win still ahead. We'll be speaking to Nigel Wilson next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. Now we're joined by Nigel Wilson, former Legal and General Group Chief Executive Officer and current Chairman also of Canary Wharf Group. I think this is a new appointment, Nigel, so congratulations on that. This is a big day in UK politics. The Tories are out, Labour's in. What do they need to do in the next 100 days?
I think they've got to get a real plan of action and start delivery on day one almost. Keir's talked about change. He's done a fantastic job of transforming the Labour Party. You and I would never have dreamed that this would happen 3 or 4 years, even 2 or 3 years ago, they'd have such a strong position here in the UK. The good news for Keir is actually the public finances are strained. The really, really good news is the personal sector and the corporate sector is capital rich. And so we have tons of money. We have £6 trillion of capital, long-term capital in the UK, which has been underdeployed, misallocated for the last 30, 40 years. So we're nearly always bottom of the G7 in terms of investment.
So where does it need to go?
It needs to go. Well, we've set up the devolution structure, which you and I have talked about before. We've got lots of ambitious mayors, lots of local people putting their hands up saying, we want to make things happen. So where do they need to spend it? An extra 20 to 30 billion pounds per year into housing. Transform the water industry by spending an extra 8 to 10 billion pounds. £50 billion per year into energy. The National Grid have just done their financing on their equity, so that's going to kickstart that. And venture capital put another £25 billion, encourage our pension funds to put the money behind the VCs so we can catch up with the Americans.
That's an industrial plan.
That is an industrial plan.
That's a new industrial plan.
Yes.
Will they do something so bold? It's bold.
They have to be bold because actually we flatlined as an economy. You know, the UK is a great place to invest. London's the best city in the world to live in. Widely accepted that, but actually we've never delivered on that. We've got the best bankers in the world here, you know, at least as good as America, a massive financial services sector. He's got to use that because actually the public finances are too strained.
But Nigel, can he do that without actually raising taxes?
Yes.
On corporations?
Yes.
Without a doubt?
Yes, without a doubt, because I think all the money's there. Because then we'll start growing. The problems of public financing are caused because we haven't grown, and therefore the public finances...
But you can't just magic up a 2.5% growth number,
no,
right?
but
It takes time.
100 billion a year is a realistic, extra additional capital is a realistic target, and all the numbers add up that we can comfortably do that. We have to make some minor policy changes. Jeremy Hunt was this close to making some of those changes. So I'm hoping that Rachel says, well, actually, the Treasury's done a lot of the work here. Let's make those changes happen. And let's really, really drive growth through investment here in the UK.
Is there a timeline problem that some of the investments, the water, the utilities, take, what, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, and growth you need next year?
Growth you need next year. The housing one, because there's a stock of housing stuck in development, so we can use call-in powers and compulsory purchase orders here in the UK. The Secretary of State can do that, and actually has to do that. Homes England can do that on CPOs. We've devolved a lot of power now, right, to all of the big cities. These are very capable people now, some of these mayors, and they want to change as well. Keir's saying, let's change. He's changed the Labour Party. We have to change the economy.
So what should they start with? Planning? I mean, if they change planning and actually build houses and make sure that they do the call-ins, it'd be a pretty big message to everyone that they do business.
I'd be looking right away at 50 or 60 of the different planning problems or planning situations, or housing projects or energy projects that are just stuck in planning, and actually use the powers they've already got to just drive those through as quickly as possible.
In the next 2-3 I mean, again, you can't...
In the 100 days. In the 100 days...
Is the honeymoon like 100 days, or is it even shorter?
Well, there's a mini honeymoon.
There's a mini honeymoon, and then there's like
there's a longer one, but the longer one isn't that long either. It's only 100 days. And so, you know, they've got to do the OBR review. That takes 10 weeks. They've got the spending review to do and the budget review. They've got to get through all of them by the end of November, and then have a true momentum going into next year. Our personal sector is better than the US in terms of lots of excess savings. The Americans have spent all theirs. We've got lots of savings here. All the political chaos elsewhere, we're going to have 5 years of political certainty. That's going to be very attractive to investors if we tell people we're going to do things.
Nigel, thank you so much. We tell people we're going to do things. Nigel Wilson, former Legal and General Group Chief Executive Officer and now Chairman of Canary Wharf Group. Now, our special coverage of Labour's landslide election will continue shortly. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back, everyone, to our special coverage of the UK election result. With us now, Bloomberg's head of media editorial, Dave Meritt, also my co-host on the podcast. Dave, we haven't really talked about Nigel Farage. He's an MP, and for the moment he has 4 seats. It was projected he'd get 13, but could actually change things in Parliament.
Well, regardless of the amount of seats he's won, when you look into the results of all the seats that the Conservatives lost, that's where the real impact of reform has been. You know, we're talking about the Labour landslide this morning. Someone just used the phrase sandslide to me. Is this a landslide built on sand? Because it's the lowest portion of votes that actually went into that Labour majority. And when you lift up the hood, you see that if reforms votes were taken out of the equation, the Conservatives really wouldn't have lost nearly as many seats as they did. So underneath the surface, there's the reform effect, which has had a huge impact on the outcome of this election. Now, Nigel Farage at some point in the campaign was talking about being the opposition or replacing the Tories. He's nowhere near that. He's got 4 seats at the current counting. He is in Parliament, though. for the first time on how many times has he tried?
8.
8 times, or 8th time lucky. He will be in Parliament, and you know he's going to be a very vocal member of Parliament. And a thorn in the side continue to be for the Conservative Party.
Dave, so does it drive policies? I mean, I imagine there's chaos, right, in the Tory party. I guess it's better than it could have been, but it's still really a very, very bad turnout for them. So, you know, does it shift everything more to the right?
Well, that is a really fascinating question. We're going to have to find out in the coming days, out of the wreckage, the amount of MPs that are left, 120 or so that they've got. Look at who's lost their seats, though. Some of the contenders, some of the people from the right of the party. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss herself lost her seat last night. So who's left to be the leadership contenders? We know the favourite, the bookie's favourite, Kemi Badenoch. She retained her seat. She'll be a contender. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's the Chancellor for the next hour or so, he kept his seat. It was pretty close. And we know he's taken a run at the leadership in the past. But we're going to have to see all of those groupings of MPs. Where does the parliamentary party sit? Is it more centrist? You know, let's take a step back and see, how did the Labour Party win this election? They moved from the extremes to the centre. It's a cliche that's often said, British elections are one of the centre. The Conservatives may want to tack back to that if they've got a hope of regaining some of this lost ground.
Dave, thanks so much. Dave Meritt there, our Bloomberg head of media editorial. Well, that's it for The Pulse. We'll have plenty more throughout the day. A Bloomberg Brief with Kriti Gupta. This is Bloomberg.